I will now reconvene, or I will now bring the October 24, 2023 regular meeting of the Everett Public School Board of Directors to order, and I will present the land acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that we are on the traditional lands of the Coast Salish, Snohomish, and Tulalip peoples. We express our deepest respect and gratitude to the ancestors of this land, on whose shoulders we stand. In Everett Public Schools, we strive to create equitable outcomes and build a culture of inclusive belonging for all students, teachers, staff, and community. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, and those with hats, please remove them. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we shall now move to section 4.0, which is roll call. Secretary, will you please call the roll?
President Lassagne.
Present.
Vice President Mitchell. Director Herman.
Present.
Director Mason.
Present.
Student Representative Kink.
Present.
Student Representative Gilbertson. Present.
Thank you very much. Our next item is section 5.0, and that's the adoption of the agenda. Dr. Salzman, would you introduce this evening's agenda?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, Board of Directors, and to the public this evening. Tonight's agenda contains the following: 2 consent agendas so directors may vote on minutes for previous meetings before the new director is sworn in, the oath of office for the newly selected board member, the superintendent's report, segment for board comments, segment for public comments, a segment for legislative updates, a segment for routine business, segment for strategic progress monitoring, segment for information and discussion, segment for new business, segment for upcoming agenda items, and a closed session. Since publishing the agenda, the following changes was made to the agenda. Item 9.01, the superintendent report, the report was updated. And item 13.02, approval of the personnel report, the report was updated. Thank you, Madam Chair and Board of Directors.
Thank you very much, Dr. Salzman. We'll now move to accept a motion for the adoption of the agenda.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved by Director Mason and seconded by Director Herman that we adopt tonight's agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to the vote. All those in favor, please respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The motion carries. Tonight's agenda is adopted. We'll now move to a consent agenda, which is added as a second item that you will see. There are 2 consent agenda, but because we have a swearing in a new director this evening, there are certain items that he was not privy to and present for. So we will now do the consent agenda. Dr. Salzman, would you introduce it?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair and Board of Directors, and to the public. The first consent agenda includes meeting minutes from previous meetings and appears here to allow directors to vote on the minutes prior to the newly selected director taking the oath of office. The remainder of the consent agendas will appear for board approval in section 13.0. These minutes were reviewed by the board in their Friday report, and there were no questions or comments. The first consent agenda is presented and published for board approval. Thank you, Madam Chair and Board of Directors.
Thank you very much, Dr. Salzman. A motion to adopt the consent agenda is now in order.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Having 2 directors do this makes it easy.
Straight.
It's been moved by Director Herman and seconded by Director Mason to approve this consent agenda. Does any director wish to remove an item from the consent agenda and place it into new business to be further heard? Hearing none, we'll proceed to the vote. All those in favor, please respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed say no. The motion carries. The consent agenda is approved. Dr. Saltzman? We'll now move to section 7.0. Dr. Saltzman, would you like to provide an introduction? Or do you wish me to?
I'm going to turn over to the chairwoman, president of the chair.
Thank you,
Fran
Dr.
Lassane.
Saltzman. Thank you very much. According to the statutes, each newly elected or re-elected or appointed member shall take an oath of office to support the Constitution of the United States and state of Washington, and to promote the interests of education and to faithfully discharge their duties. As a school director officer, I have that opportunity to do that. So to give you some history, Director Andrew Nichols served as a school board member since 2020. He resigned from the director because of family issues back in July 31st. He completed over 4 years of a 6-year term. But now we have appointed through 5 excellent candidates that submitted their names. It was very, very, very difficult to choose. We have appointed a new director to fulfill the remaining portions of that term. Mr. Roman Revelinsky has been selected to serve as the director for the remaining portion of the term. That will come available at the next election in 2025. And the appointees at that time must meet the prescribed requirements of the law. So I have this opportunity. Do I? Okay, gotcha. I just want to make sure. I haven't done this before, but I have had the opportunity to swear in people that are going to be serving for the military. Lucky me, but I don't believe this person has that desire. But I believe, Owen, you have the desire to be an elected school board officer. So what we're going to do at this particular point in time is we're going to swear you in as a school board director. Unless you want to go back into the military, I can also do that. That's what you're doing. Please repeat after me. Oh, wait a minute. Do you have family members here? I do. Would you like to introduce your family members at this time before, you take the office? Sure, I suppose.
I told him we would do it after, but we can do it before.
It would be nice. They could be in the picture while you're raising your hand.
Come on up.
Join me. I was too at one time. Please introduce me.
This is Elzbieta. That's Polish for Elizabeth. She goes to Penny Creek in 3rd grade. This is my wonderful wife Cherry. This is Nadia. She's a 9th grader at Cascade. And Nico, who's in 8th grade at Eisenhower.
Wow. I know it wasn't Cascade very well, and I am learning about Penny Creek, so I look forward to being able to see all of you on campus. Thank you so much for allowing your husband to step forward. There will be many nights when you're probably wondering, how come he didn't fix it? I don't know if he already fixed it, but he will be away, and we are so appreciative of that. To do this, because it does take a thing to do this job, because it supports so many children. And he won't be in a position anymore to say he don't know his kids. He'll be in a position where he can say he has 19,964 kids that he's concerned about and he's worried about. So you have to understand when he says that. There's a reason why. Okay, you can stand right there. Please repeat after me. Glasses on, because I might give you the oath of office for the military. I state your name.
He has to put his hand up.
Oh. Your name. I state your name.
I, Roman Revelinsky,
do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear
or affirm
or affirm
that I will
that I will
support the Constitution
support the Constitution
and the laws of the United States
and the laws of the United States
and the Constitution
and the Constitution
and the laws of the state of Washington,
and the laws of the state,
and that I will faithfully
and that I will faithfully
and impartially
and impartially
perform and discharge
perform and discharge
the duties of the office
the duties of the office
of Everett School Director, Everett School District 2,
of Everett School District 2,
Director at Large,
Director at Large,
Position 1,
Position 1,
for a 25-month term
for a 25-month term,
according to law,
according to law,
to the best of my abilities.
to the best of my ability.
Okay. Just for pretend. Thank you. Great. Now, you have to sign this in order to make it official. And then afterwards, your family can stay for the remainder of the meeting. They can go home and have dinner without you. But, does anybody, Madam Secretary, do you have a pen?
Either do it now or later.
I can sign one, right?
No, sign one.
One for now.
But you
Yeah.
can sign the others later. Let's sign one, because she was gonna take a picture of the signing.
Where do you want me to sign?
Okay. How about right up here?
Right here? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's okay, you didn't get enough.
Okay.
Thanks so much. Okay, please take your seat.
Congratulations and welcome.
Thank you.
It is so fulfilling, I guess you would say, to have a full complement of directors up in the diocese. Even though Director Mitchell is away right now, she's traveling because of business, we are now fully seated with 5 directors and 2 student reps. So the diocese is full. Okay. We'll now move to section 8.0, which is recognitions. And tonight, we have no further recognition scheduled for this agenda. Moving to section 9.0, that is our superintendent's report. Dr. Salzman.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Board of Directors, and to the public this evening. Mr. Walensky, congratulations on your appointment, and to your family, thank you so much for letting us have the hours of your husband, and you can go home and do your homework and have a nice dinner, but thank you so much. Welcome. I'd like to start out this evening acknowledging that our school district is a diverse and vibrant community comprised of individuals from various backgrounds, cultures, and belief systems. It is our collective responsibility to foster an environment where every student feels safe, supported, and valued. Recent global events, such as the Israeli-Hamas conflict, can have a profound impact on some and all of our students at the same time, and it is crucial that we all remain sensitive to their experiences. The Israeli-Hamas conflict, like many international issues, can evoke strong emotions, and students may have personal connections as well as adults, experience or perspective related to this situation. As educators and community members, we have a duty to ensure that our schools remain a place of learning and also of understanding, where respectful dialogue and empathy are encouraged. I am confident that our school community can continue to be a shining example of inclusivity and empathy, working together to support all our students during these challenging times as we teach them the values of respect, compassion, and understanding. I don't sit up here and give speeches like this, but I spoke to our students recently and to our staff, and I felt I was compelled to speak to our community in the same breath that I share with you tonight. So I wanted to take this time to share that with you. Thank you. On October 13th, a non-student day for our district, Everett Public Schools participated in Learning Improvement Day, which you would call LID days, sessions on elevating equitable practices of all staff. Even non-school-based staff participated, so our entire community participated. The session topics were centrally developed by our professional learning, diversity, equity, and inclusion departments, our principals, and our staff members. They were tightly designed to strengthen implementation, consistency, and common outcomes across our system. I want to thank everybody that participated in that LID Day. It was a great success, and everybody was part of it, which makes it a great success. So thank you. I want to share with you that our high school students, along with high school students from several other districts, had an amazing opportunity to explore the trades. We had a trade offer hands-on experience at Cascade High School. Construction, electrical, emergency services, and more offered hands-on experience for our youngsters so they can learn more about what the future really could look like. Some may even find that they would love to do that right after high school and have many choices, and that was the purpose. And I will tell you, it was a really good turnout by our district, and salutes to everybody here and everybody in our district that was there and our students. Tomorrow, all 10th graders will take the preliminary student, which is called the PSAT test. At no cost for the first time, it will be online. There'll be a 3.5-hour late start for all other high school students that have, and late bus transportation will be provided. The PSAT has many benefits for our students. And we continue to work on our merit scholars as well. So take that PSAT. For those students that are taking it, get a good night rest. And to our community and board that allowed us to do this tomorrow, thank you. I want to share today also, we have so many wonderful partnerships with our community who volunteer to come into our schools and share their knowledge with our students. I want to share with you a special story. Recently, a local firefighter visited a kindergarten class at View Ridge Elementary School. And boy, was that the talk of the town in that building. He showed the students some of the gear that he wears and how heavy it is and what he has to do to go to work and the purpose along with all the different aspects of a firefighter's job. I share that with you because that is how our community embraces our students and how our students learn from our community. I'd like to take this time to congratulate the school board. They are recipients of Board of Distinction. Please don't take that lightly to our public, because not every board wins that award. They are recognized for ongoing professional development, addressing opportunity gaps, and practicing governance that reflects the Washington School Board standards during the 2022-23 school year, and they'll be honored in a few weeks at the WASDA conference in Bellevue. Congratulations, board, so well deserved of your great work. Thank you, Madam Chair, and to the board directors for my report this evening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Salzman. We'll now move to section 10.0, which is our board and student representative comments. The purpose of this agenda item is for directors and student representatives to have the opportunity to share what they've encountered throughout their work in the district, in schools, and as well as in the community. It's going to be requested that our board members keep it short and keep it brief, but provide interesting comments about their work. Director Herman.
Thank you so much. Just very quickly, welcome to our newest director. Really good to have you here. And Dr. Salzman, thank you for your opening comments. Just a few things for me tonight. Since the last board meeting, I was able to take part in Cedarwood's instructional review a couple weeks ago. Once again, it was affirming to see the discussions around school goals being grounded in data and using school data to identify those areas and student groups that they want to be focusing on. The highlights for me in these IRs, as we call them, is really the classroom visits. And as Director Mitchell had once said, this is where the sausage gets made. Just as one example of what I saw, I visited one of the classrooms, was a third grade classroom, I believe, had two students up in front of the class leading the discussion about how to solve a math problem using the smartboard. The other classmates were raising their hand to participate, and the teacher was simply a facilitator of this. And so it was fantastic to see this very thoughtful discussion, student-led, and around math. So it was just a wonderful, wonderful thing as a director to see, and that was just in one of the classrooms we visited. Later in our meeting tonight, we'll be talking about achievement scores, but those classroom visits and those instructional reviews really demonstrate how we move the needle as a district. And it's just, again, affirming to see some really high quality instruction happening in our schools. So well done to Cedarwood on that. Last Tuesday, there was a Let's Connect session. There was several Let's Connect sessions, and I was able to attend the one for Region 3 at Gateway. So a big thank you to Larry Fleckenstein and the Region 3 school administrators for coming out that night. I think as a district, we continue to open ourselves up to these two-way connections, share our goals, and I think most valuable, offer families a chance to really connect with their school administration and the district. So I look forward to seeing more of that as we can continue. And then lastly, Snow Isle Tech. Also last week, I was able to attend a Snow Isle Tech presentation at Jackson High School for students and parents. And so a thank you to Darren Dahlke, the College and Career Specialist at Jackson, and Teresa Hausman from Snow Isle Tech. A fantastic presentation and explanation of the program, what it looks like for students who want to explore different careers in their junior and senior year of high school by going off campus to the Skills Center. For Jackson, it's the first 3 years, first three periods in the morning. I believe that's for Jackson and Cascade. And just over 20 programs, culinary arts, criminal justice, video game design, construction trades, a long list of opportunities. And as you were talking about the trade-up program, it's sinking in more and more how many opportunities our high school students have to really explore different careers. And I'm really glad at what we have going on. And I can't wait to see that expanding as well. So fantastic to see. Also, Snow Isle Tech has some summer school opportunities, and November 2nd is their open house. If anyone is interested. So just some really great things going on. Thanks.
What's the date on the open house?
November 2nd is our open house. And actually, I just got an email that November 16th, there's an apprenticeship information. I know you were interested in some of that apprenticeship work, so.
Okay. Well, I'm going to start with my last item first, because it is very much a continuation of what you were talking about. Earlier today, I was able to visit Everett High's High School and Beyond event, which they hold during the school day to ensure that every student gets an opportunity to attend. And I just walked the room, and I had a lot of time to just talk to the people at the tables, to better understand the programs that they're offering. So there were a lot of colleges there representing their schools, but there were also a lot of different opportunities for our students to leave high school and go into apprenticeships or trade programs where the company actually either employs them and then trains them or helps cover the cost of their training. And I continue to say, I just feel so fortunate that we have these programs in our district and in our backyard. So many of these type of opportunities have left our country, so to speak, and we still have so many. So I'm just thankful, because we all know college isn't for every single student, and the fact that we have programs that continue their education and train them to hopefully bring them to a living wage job, although that's very tricky in the part of country we live right now. But I'd also like to just give a shout out to the CTE department for the work that they're doing also for students in the classroom before they actually leave us, to prepare them for some of these opportunities. They're really doing a great job of aligning these for our students. Well, my first item was to welcome you. So I'm going backwards. Nice to have someone sitting in that seat next to us, and look forward to working together. I also, along with many other folks in the room, attended the Cocoon House auction. And this is one of our very strategic partners. Their auction raised $390,000 this year. And those funds go to support many of our students that are experiencing homelessness and don't have the same opportunities as some of our other students. They're a key and very important partner of ours in our district, and it just feels so good to be able to support them through their auction. And it also suggests that our community is very supportive of those students, which also warms my heart. So, and it's a lot of fun too, for those who haven't been. And then lastly, I also attended the Lex Connect session with Dr. Woods and her presentation. And I just appreciate the families that took the time out on a rainy Tuesday to come learn more about the connections of our strategic plan, and just hope that they learned a great deal and felt that their voice was heard and valued, because that's really what these Let's Connect sessions are all about. So that's all I have. Thank you, President Lassane.
Thank you very much. Director Revelinsky, do you have anything to say? If not, you can just.
I would just like to say thank you, ladies.
And I'd like to welcome you also to the board.
Thank you.
We'll now move to Student Representative Kink. Would you have a few words?
First off, I'd just like to say congratulations to our new member. It'll be nice to have some new input, and I'm looking forward to working with you. At Jackson, fall sports just ended. Tennis is setting a record of 4 players to state this year, and we're hoping to win it again. Volleyball, girls soccer, and cross country all finished really well in their league too. Like Dr. Saltzman said, we're taking the PSAT tomorrow, and this is a great opportunity for sophomores and juniors to better college applications, see what your new score looks like. And adding on to what you two said, last Thursday, Dr. Saltzman took me and Alice to the CTE meeting here, and we learned a lot about CTE programs such as Educators Rising, and other apprenticeships offered to students to help guide their life post-high school. And they also had a lot of great food that was offered by the Cascade students. So that was a really good opportunity.
Thank you very much. Student Representative Gilbertson.
Well, thank you, and congratulations, Mr. Revelinsky, for being the new board member. Excited for that. So last week, Everett High had our Spirit Week and Homecoming, which was a lot of fun, seeing all the school spirit and people dress up for every day. We had like pajama day, we had our school spirit day, obviously. Then we had like Barbie versus Oppenheimer, which was a lot of fun. I also got to work at the tailgate, serving food to a bunch of classmates and just hungry families. And then, as well as adding on to what Will and Director Mason said, the CTE, Dr. Saltzman got to take us to that, and we got to meet some of the members of that. Mm-hmm. And I also was talking to one of them today at the high school and beyond, which was awesome. And as well as on the Learning Improvement Day the teachers had last week, I was able to sit on a small board of students who we gave our input in to the teachers on good and bad experiences we've had in the school district, and then what teachers can do to improve. But yeah, that's about it.
Thank you very much. Student Rep Gilbertson. I do want to mention that I had the opportunity of going back over to Eisenhower, home of the Patriots, and I'm visiting them with their IR today. And I can truly say that they have made some significant changes. And one thing that I noticed is the amount of discipline actions, I guess you would say, within their school has dropped considerably. And we asked, what can you pinpoint that towards? And it's really a resounding make relationships with your students. And that's one of the things that I really found very heartwarming. Because if kids feel a belonging at school, the tendency, I guess you would have to have disciplinary problems goes down. And when kids feel like they have, I guess, adults who really care about them being in school and actually sitting there doing the work, and they know that they're safe and that they're supported, kids will less likely to have disciplinary problems. So I would like to just mention that I am so grateful that we finally realize that having strong relationships with adults on campus is very important. And they've done the work. And I would just say there's still a lot more to be done, because middle school is a very difficult stage. And if middle school students can feel supported and feel belonging at their school, when they get to high school, gosh, there's no ceiling for them. And so I would just like to congratulate them on what they've done to accomplish that. Boards of distinction. I look forward to that. I think as a board, we've worked very hard coming through the pandemic. And I must say that it isn't just the board. If it had not been for the administrative, the staff, the teachers, all the employees that work here, everyone, we could never have done the work that we are required to do. We cannot support you. And we would like to just say again, thank you all for that opportunity to represent Everett Public Schools. So with that being said, we'll move on to the next section, which is section 11.0, which is our public comment section. The school board specifically sets aside time during our regular board meeting to hear from our constituents. We do this because we value public input. We want to hear and understand the perspectives you bring to the table. Public comments are part of the agenda for the board to listen to what you have to say. It is not for debate or discussion. Board members will not respond to individual comments. And I will be calling the first person that has provided a request for a comment. And that would be a person who is participation by the Everett School District's high school in the High Cube program, from what it says here. Person is Dave Korkowski.
Yes.
Did I pronounce your name correctly?
Excellent.
Please come forward. You will have 3 minutes in which to present your commentation. And there are 3 blips on the podium there. The first one is going to be green. It'll indicate that you have 3 minutes to speak. The orange one will come on when there's 30 seconds left in your time, and then the red will indicate that your time is up.
Very good.
Please go forward.
So I'm Dave Korkowski. I have the privilege of directing the High Q program, which we inherited. It went from Scott Paper Company to Everett Community College, and now it's supported by Monroe School District, which has the stage equipment and provides logistical support. We have a long history of high Q competition with Everett schools. In the 90s, we have a long string of victories by Cascade Bruins. More recently, in 2015, we have a championship by the Timberwolves of Jackson High School. And we would like to see more of these plates engraved with Everett high schools. I'm told most recently by the activities director at Cascade, Ms. Kelly Rogers, that she has a terrible time trying to get an advisor or coach for high Q. And that's clearly a problem with the increased demands that came onto teachers' shoulders with COVID. But surely we can find someone. At Jackson, I'm actually a little more concerned because At least last year, they had an experienced and willing coach and eager students, but the program did not secure funding from administration. And I suppose that's the main reason that I'm here. If we think that primary students need to see and hear good reading in order to become good readers, then I believe that secondary students, whom we hope will become good independent learners, need to observe some quality independent learning. And there's nothing more exciting to me than to be in a gym full of students who are cheering because somebody answered a question about a Shakespeare play or art history, or got a math question. Every contest concludes with a math toss-up question that's one of those, who can do it first? And I'm certain that students at Everett and Cascade and Jackson High School could field representative quality teams, and I'd like to bring this show to them. I don't know where I should distribute this, not enough, I suppose, but there's a little bit of added information. And I would be delighted to hear from anyone in the Everett School District about how to get a Cascade team or a Jackson team or an Everett High School team into the competition. We could still make it happen this year.
Thank you very much, Mr. Korkowski, for coming in. I appreciate it. You will get a
Great.
written response.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now move to section 12, and that is our legislative updates. And our legislative rep is Director Herman. Director Herman.
Great, thank you. So in mid-fall, this is the typical part of the year where associations and groups are forming their legislative priorities leading up to the legislative session starting in January. So just to give you an update, we submitted our feedback to WASDA on this, and they will share the final 2024 legislative priorities document in the next week or two from WASDA. Here in Everett, we're in the process of doing the same, compiling our feedback from the same process using the legislative, the 123 that we had voted on, and coming up with several priorities that capture what we in Everett would like to see this next session. A draft and discussion of this will be at the next regular board meeting on November 14th, with the final adoption scheduled for the November 28th meeting. So we'll be talking about that soon. As you know, this upcoming 2024 legislative session is a short session, only 60 days long, and a supplemental budget year. Historically, there are no big policies adopted in the short sessions and likely only budget adjustments. So just to temper expectations of what we can get accomplished, the 60 days will go very, very quickly, as we've been warned. I've been told bills can be pre-filed beginning December 4th. And so we'll start seeing what is coming back, which bills are not being pushed forward, and maybe some new ones at that point. A reminder about why this is important for us, and this is more for public viewers of this meeting. Most of our school board policies and policy revisions are driven by legislative action. And so, for example, when Mr. Fleckenstein comes up to present policy revisions in our school board meeting, like he will be doing today, many of those revisions are done to comply with a House bill or a Senate bill passed in the previous session. So we just want to be ready to lend our voice to those new bills as they're being formed, whether to support or speak against something that's coming down the pipeline. So this process of coming to a consensus as a board helps us better advocate in Olympia as these decisions are happening. And then lastly, just a note to directors that the twice-a-month networking hour with WASDA, our School Director Association, that typically happens on Thursdays from 12 to 1 is right now not just specifically focused on legislative issues, but is a general networking call for directors. And this week's topic is artificial intelligence in K-12 education, which I know is of interest to us. So these calls do not provide for deliberation or conversation, so it's okay to have more than 2 directors on a call without a special meeting notice. Great information coming from WASDA these days to help us stay informed as school directors and help our work here in the district. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Herman. We'll now move to section 13, which is our consent agenda. Dr. Saltzman, would you introduce the consent agenda?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, Board Directors, and the public this evening. The board's consent agenda includes repetitive business items such as meeting minutes, personnel actions, expense vouchers, surplus lists, gifts, grants, and recurring contracts. Sometimes it includes items that occur less frequently but are of routine business nature. These items are usually reviewed by the board in the Friday report, 1 or more weeks before the board meeting. This gives directors time to ask staff questions or to consider a discussion about the policy implications of those items. The board votes on the consent agenda in a single motion. By its definition, the consent agenda is not debatable. In the case of this consent agenda, the superintendent's office received no questions regarding items on the consent agenda. The consent agenda is presented as published for board approval. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saltzman. A motion to adopt the consent agenda is now in order.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Director Mason and seconded by Director Herman to approve the consent agenda. Does any director wish to remove an item from this consent agenda, place it under new business so it can be heard? Hearing none, we'll now proceed to the vote. All those in favor, please respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, say no. Any abstentions? Very well. The consent agenda is approved. We'll now move to section 14, which is strategic progress monitoring. This evening, we have a presentation on the annual achievement presentation, and our presenter in chief is Dr. Matthews, and she is at the podium.
Have to practice the order in which to make the clicks so that this works for us all. Apologize for the delay. All right. President Lassane, members of the board, student representatives, Dr. Salzman, thank you for having me here tonight for this opportunity to present the annual achievement report. Tonight, I will be presenting our data and an analysis of district results, district and state comparison, trends in our data, level and index improvements in student performance, student group trends, comparison reports, pre and post-pandemic patterns of performance, and then Drs. Woods and Meisner and Mr. Fleckenstein will be joining me for final discussion of analysis of the data to action in the classroom. So they'll be talking about the work that they do when they take all of this data and work with school leaders and school staffs to put it into action to move our schools forward. So earlier this year, you heard me speak, and this is a slide that you saw. And I share this with you tonight because it is really important for us to remember that as we talk about our student data, we really need to think about it in terms of analysis to action. Analyzing the data alone will not move the system forward. We have to really think about that data in a way that helps us to focus our resources and our activities to improve student learning. I also share with you just some data rules that I have that I want to remind you of, and that is that, first of all, data that I speak about when I am before you represents our children that we all are working very hard for, our community loves and supports. And the data that we look at will tell us what is, but it will not always tell us exactly the why or the how of that data. And it is in fact the how and the why that will help to move the system forward. So when we think about student data, we must remember that it's very complex and proficiency is never the whole story. In fact, we have many trailing and leading indicators. I'm back before you to talk about things like the iReady diagnostic, for example, that will help us to move the system in different ways. And that when we think about standardized assessments, the annual test, we have to triangulate that data with other data that we have in the system, whether it's WIDA data on multilingual learners or end of unit assessments or diagnostics with iReady. The other thing that I talked with you about before was the ladder of inference. And I may have led you to believe that this is something that you sort of in a linear way walk up. But as you're going to see tonight, and when you hear from our regional superintendents, it's really not that clear. And I'm going to give you a realistic hypothetical to illustrate that. So we're going to look at a lot of data tonight. And when I'm looking at data, I often make observations of patterns that I see. So perhaps I might see that there is a group of students who are lagging behind another group of students. And that might lead me to select some piece of data to analyze. And for example, I might ask, is this group of students struggling in every area, or is it a specific content area, for example? And as I analyze that data, I start to make meaning about that data. I might find that it is, in fact, one content area over another. And I might start to ask questions. I might talk to other professionals. And that might lead me to collect some more data, because perhaps I'm not on the right track. And then as I make more observations, then I might start moving back up that ladder, and I might even come to some conclusions that in fact could be right or they could be wrong. And so I might be headed right back down to collect some more data. My point here is that it might look messy, but it is really an efficient way for us to focus our energies in solving the right problem. That if in fact we just move up this ladder in a linear way and then test out our theories and start all over, we're really not going to get where we need to be. And you will hear from the regional superintendents about that process. But I tell you this because we're going to look at a lot of data tonight. And you have to look at it within that frame of how we will ultimately use that data in schools to move our learning forward. So I'll start with the district results, some state comparison and trends. So if we look at the Smarter Balanced Assessment in English Language Arts for students in grades 3 through 8 and 10, 64.6% of students overall met standard on that assessment. Likewise, on the Smarter Balanced Assessment in Mathematics, 51.7% of students met standards in grade 3 through 8 and 10. And then in grades 5, 8, and 11, students in the Washington Comprehensive Assessment of Science met standard at a rate of 55.9%. Now, when we look at that from a grade standpoint, and we will look more deeper in a moment, you will see that for English Language Arts, we have a similar pattern to 2022. The difference is that the scores are higher. But essentially, we have about a 10% grade band in which our students perform in grades 3 through 10. In mathematics, also performing at a higher rate than we did in 2022. And you'll see some differences from the perspective that 3rd through and 4th grade, we see that sustained performance, and then a higher performance going all the way through grade 10. In grade, in science, very similar to 2022, we see 5th grade at the highest with 64.3. At 8th grade, 49.5% met standard. In 11th grade, 53.4% met standard. And that is actually a sustained growth of over 14% over 2 years. On the right side, you see the alternate WAAIM that stands for Access to Instruction and Measurement. And that's our alternative assessment. So students who meet the standard qualify for that through their individual educational plan in special education, take that. It is a fairly small number of students, ranging from 1 to 30 in any grade level. And so you'll see some are suppressed because of the low size of the group. When we compare our performance to the state, Everett Public Schools students outperform the state in every subject, in every grade level. And in 13 of the 17 areas, we outperform the state in double digits. So it's quite a celebration. When we compare ourselves to the local 7 school districts, or excuse me, when we compare ourselves to 6 others of our 7 local school districts, we outperform 5 of those school districts, and we are just behind North Shore in our performance in all of the areas. So now we're going to look at the trend in the Smarter Balanced Assessment in English Language Arts. And in orange here, you're seeing the 2021 scores. And just as a reminder, that test's a little bit different. It was shorter. It did not have extended response questions. And it was given not in the spring of 21, as normally would be given. It was given in the fall of 22, based on the students' last year's standards, about 12 to 16 weeks after instruction. The 22 and the 23 assessment, so 2022 in gray and in blue, the 23 assessment, those both had the same blueprint, so they're the same assessment. So in grades 4, 8, and 10, we've seen a steady increase in our performance from 2021 to 2023. In grades 3, 5, and 7, we saw a substantial increase from 21 to 22, and then similar performance from 22 to 23. And in grade 6, we saw a substantial increase from 21 to 22, and then a very small decrease of 1.3% from 22 to 23. Now this shows us grade 3, for example, of 3 different years. So that's 3 different groups of students. And one of the things that can be very helpful for us to understand student learning is to look at our data from a cohort perspective. So what you're seeing here is last year's 5th grade students and their performance in 21, 22, and 23. And so you can see they've had a steady increase in their performance and their level of proficiency over time from 55.7 to 66.9. When we look at our 6th grade students, you can see there was an increase from 2021 to 2022, and then a decrease that brought us above the 2021 level, but a decrease nonetheless. Now, this is a really great example of what we're talking about when we say analysis to action. So if you notice, these students did not have a 3rd grade score, and that's because their 3rd grade was in 2020. And in the last quarter of the year, we were out of school due to the pandemic. So this is a group of students in grade 3 that missed in-person instruction in grade 3 for the last quarter of the school year, and were not tested. So one of the ways that we use this kind of data is that we look at that 6th grade test where there's a slight decrease, and we look at the target report that tells us the standards that students did well in or perhaps struggled in. And then we can actually go back to 3rd grade to that instructional map and see what was or should have been taught in that year. And understanding that the standards build on each other and often are similar standards, just at a higher level of rigor, a higher complexity of text, we can see the areas that we might need to focus on as these students move to 7th grade. For our 7th graders last year, see a steady climb, 59 to 65.4. 8th grade, we had a substantial increase between 6th and 7th grade, a slight decrease in 8th grade. And again, this is a group that missed a pivotal transition year, that last quarter of 5th grade. And then our 10th grade students last year, 54.4 to 68.8% in 2 years. So that's a pretty large increase over the course of 2 years. They did not have a 9th grade exam, obviously. All right, so now turning to math, the same similar information. So our orange is our 21 assessment, gray is our 22, and then blue is our 23. So right off the bat, in grades 3 through 7, we saw a substantial increase from 21 to 22, or excuse me, 21 to 23. In 8th grade, a substantial increase from 21 to 22, and then similar performance in 23. And then in 10th grade, increase from 21 to 22 and a 1.6, a very small decrease in the 23 school year. And again, when we look at those cohort performances, we see our 5th grade students still above that 21 performance, slight drop from 22 to 23, as did our 6th grade students. Our 7th grade students have had a steady climb. 8th grade students had a substantial increase from 21 to 22 and a smaller decrease in 23. And then we've seen our 10th grade students increase over time. Science, we don't have that cohort perspective because we only test in 5th, 8th, and 11th grade, which is the state requirement. So in 5th grade, we had a similar performance for the last 3 years at around 64%. In 8th grade, we had a dip from 21 to 22 and a similar performance in 23 as we did in 22. And the opposite was true in 11th grade with an increase, substantial increase from 43.9 to 55.3 in 22, and then a similar performance in the 23 school year. So, proficiency is one way for us to measure how students are improving, but it is a pretty large grain. And we know that there are students out there who have not yet reached proficiency who are in fact improving. And as you know from the Washington School Improvement Framework, our state, and we frankly, value growth over proficiency, because growth is how you get to proficiency. And so one of the things that we monitor is whether or not students are improving from one level to the next over the course of years so that they get to proficiency. And if they're not jumping between levels in a single year, are they in fact still improving their skill score so that they're accelerating their learning over time? So the first look that we're going to take is the level change. So this is a matched cohort. That means that the students in this data set were here in 22 and they were here in 23. And when we look at their level in 22 and compare it to 23, we can see that 270 students who were in level 1 in 2022 reached level 2 in 2023. That's 24% of those students in level 1. 102 students jumped 2 levels and made it all the way to proficient. And we even had 11 students who jumped all the way to level 4. The students who are at level 2 in 2022 in English Language Arts, 354 made it to proficiency at level 3, and another 91 made it all the way to level 4. So that represents at level 1, 34% of students jumping 1 or more levels who started in level 1 in 2022. And for the students who started at level 2, 40% of them made at least a level jump. In math, we see similar data. 342 students who started in level 1 in 2022 made it to level 2. Another 34 met standard at level 3, and 6 went all the way to level 4. And for our students who were in level 2 in 2022, 343 made it to level 3, and another 73 to level 4. So 24% of the level 1 students in 2022 jumped 1 or more levels, and 29% of the students in level 2 in math jumped 1 or more levels. Now, whole level is amazing, and frankly, those students who went from level 1 to level 4, or even 2 to 4, that's truly, truly amazing. But we also know that there are students who are substantially behind who are making progress whether they jump that level right away or not. And we have to monitor those because they add up progressively to where we need to get. And to illustrate that, or to monitor that, we use the SBA index. So I want to talk a little bit about how that comes to be, and then we will look at the actual data. So what you're seeing here are the scale score points required at each grade level to meet standard on the assessment. And if you look at those scale score points, the difference between them is very modest. You know, it's 41 points between grades 3 and 4, 29 between 4 and 5. But you have to remember, a whole year later, a whole year of learning, a whole year higher standard, more rigorous, right? So if we have a student who is substantially behind in 3rd grade, for example, this student at 2319, if they only made the scale score change required to meet standard between each level, that student would not be at standard at the 4th grade level, even by 8th grade. That student really has to have a large increase. In fact, this student has to have more than 90 points a year in order to get to standard in a reasonable amount of time. So we want to monitor that and where our students are going. So we calculate what's called the Smarter Balanced Assessment Index, the SBA index. And this is an actual student that you're seeing here. The red bars are the range of level 1, the yellow is the range of level 2, and the green is 3, and the blue is 4. So this first student in 5th grade, they were at 2467. And that translates to a 2.17. And what that means is they're in level 2, and they're 17% of the way through that band. So if they really had no acceleration of their learning, we'd expect them to be a year later, a year higher standards, a year of instruction at 2.17. This student, however, was at 2532, and when we calculate the index for that, it's a 2.76, which means his or her performance increased 60% of that band. They are still not at standard, but that is a huge jump, 60% of that level. And in fact, by 7th grade, this student was at a 2593, which put them at a 3.39. So in those 2 years, they were able to get from level 2 to level 3 and made progress each year. If we just look at the scale score, we just look at the level, then we can't really see the improvement in learning that we're seeing actually in our students. All right, so this is that match cohort again, and you see in the first column the level for 2022. And what we find is that for English language arts, 65% of students in level 1 in 2022 increase their SBA index score. Now remember, 34% of those students jumped a level or more, but 65% got closer. So whether, even if they didn't jump a level, they got closer to proficiency. 59% of students in level 2 increased their SBA index score. And not to disregard level 3 and 4, we see big gains with them as well. 55% of students in level 3 also increased their SBA index score. In math in level 1, students in level 1 in 2022, 59% of them increased their index score, and 52% of the students who are in level 2 in 2022 increased their index score by 2023. Now, again, not to disregard students in level 3 or 4, but level 1 and 2 students are the ones we're trying to get to standard, right? And so if we dig into that data a little bit more deeply by grade level and by their performance level in 2022. So here we have each grade level, 3 through 7, and the students in level 1 and 2. And for example, of the students who were in grade 3 in 2022 and level 1, 62% of them increased their SBA index, and they increased it on average by 0.56. That's half a level. And if you look at the numbers here, you'll see, for example, 67% of grade 4 students in level 1 improved their SBA index score more than half a level. In grade 4, level 2 students, 62% improved their index score, and the average was 0.95. Their average was almost a whole level. So these are pretty great numbers for us to see, because even though these students are not yet at proficiency, they are showing progress toward that goal of being proficient. If we look at math, we see very similar information. Here's our grade 3 level 1 students. 76% of them made progress, and their average increase was 0.47, so nearly half a level. You can see the grade 3 level 2 students, 66% made progress, and on average 0.67 of a level. So this is giving us great data about students making progress, and we know this about every student. We can track this about every student. All right, next we're going to talk about the student group trends. So this is all of our students, and it's disaggregated by race or ethnicity and qualification for special programs, so free and reduced meals program, multilingual learners, and students with disabilities. And this is English language arts. For American Indian, Alaska Native, Asian, Black or African American, white, students who qualify for free or reduced meals, multilingual learner program, and the students with disabilities all have seen steady increases over time for the last 3 years. We also saw substantial increases from 21 to 22, and then similar performance in 23 for our overall group of students, and then for our Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander students. For our Hispanic or Latino and our 2 or more races students, we saw substantial increase from 21 to 22, and then a decrease from 22 to 23. It's fairly modest decreases there. In mathematics, for students of all grades, we saw steady increases in performance for all students: Asian, Black or African American, white, students who qualify for free and reduced meals, multilingual learners, and students with disabilities. Saw increases from 21 to 22, and then similar performance in 23 for our Hispanic or Latino students and our Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander students. We saw substantial increases from 21 to 22 with a small decrease for American Indian, Alaska Native, and our 2 or more races students. When we look at our Washington Comprehensive Assessment of Science scores, this is students in grades 5, 8, and 11. We saw increases for our multilingual learners. We saw similar performance over time for all Black or African American, white, and students with disabilities. And we saw increases generally from 21 to 22, although small decreases for our Hispanic, Latino, and our Native Hawaiian Pacific Islanders. And then slight decreases from 22 to 23 in most cases. So one of the things that we also look at is our comparison in terms of enrollment and free and reduced lunch percentage when we compare ourselves to other districts. And in this case, I'm showing you the 25 largest school districts in the state. The school districts in dark blue are in the top third of performance, in light blue, the second third of performance, and in gray, the lowest performance. And you can see Everett right there with a little orange dot. These schools are all ranked in increasing order of free and reduced lunch. And we do this because, there's research that shows us that increased free and reduced lunch rates are often correlated with lower performance. And I want to really specify right now, we are in the business of defeating the predictability of failure. So this is not to say this is what we want to see or like to see, but it is a way for us to look at our performance against what the research would predict. And in fact, we outperform. So if we look, for example, here's the 2023 third grade ELA scores, and you see all of our scores for elementary across this. And we look at Everett Public Schools, we are 6th lowest in free and reduced lunch rate. We are 5th in 3rd grade, 4th grade ELA, 3rd and 4th grade math, and 5th grade science. So that means that we're performing higher than our rank would predict. And for the remaining, we are at the same level. So we are at or above our prediction for every one of our grade levels and subject areas in elementary school. The same is true in middle school, with the one exception of 6th grade math. In 2023, we're a 7 instead of a 6 or higher. And I would say one of the things I've been celebrating a lot this year is our high school performance in ELA. We're at 5th, so outperforming our rank, 6th, so at our rank in math, and then 1st for the 2nd year in science. And so that is in comparison to the other 25 largest school districts. One other way to look at this same data on a little finer grain is to look at how the trends change over time. And so this dot plot, you will see Everett where the orange dot is here. And all the schools to the left have lower free and reduced lunch rates. All the schools to the right have higher free and reduced lunch rates. So it's the same 25 largest school districts. And this particular plot is for 4th grade ELA. Here you see Everett Public Schools, and the darker red dot on top represents our performance in 2023. The blue dot in the middle is our 22 performance, and the orange dot in the bottom is our 21 performance. And this is really what you want to see. You want to see over time increasing. Of course, you know, we'd like it to be at the very top and large increases, but this is the progress that gets us where we want to be. In comparison, if you look at Yakima, they dropped in 22 and returned to the same score they were at in 21, very tightly clustered and low performance. Even if you look at Seattle with less free and reduced lunch than we have, you see that same really tight cluster and making not much progress. So all of the school districts below this blue line, we're outperforming. But also, as we look at this dot plot, our movement is in the right direction with that ever increasing scores moving upward. So one of the pieces of data that, or one of the questions that OSPI asked was, as a state, is our pattern of performance, so not our proficiency level, but the pattern of performance between any 2 years returning or the same post-pandemic as it was pre-pandemic? And with the administration of the 23 assessment, which was the same as the 22 assessment, we're able to look at that, and we also calculated this for our school district. So the comparison here is really asking, if we look at 2018 and 2019, and we look at 22 and 23, is that pattern of performance similar or dissimilar? So this is English Language Arts for grade 5, and across the bottom you have 10 deciles. And so this is very much like the Washington School Improvement Framework. What we did was we took all the 5th graders' English Language Arts scale scores, we rank ordered them, and then we put them in deciles with 10% of scores in each decile. So the bottom decile will be lowest 10% of scores. The 10th decile will be the highest 10% of scores. And if you look at this pattern, it is very similar, the shape of the pattern. There's sort of a upward trend in the beginning, a little bit of a evening out, and then as the scores, deciles get higher, then we see that acceleration. So what we see when we look, for example, at the lowest 10% of scores is that the 18-19 and the 22-23 are clustered pretty closely together. What is interesting is that by the 5th or 6th decile, those two pairs of lines converge and then they cross. So the 22-23 performance is actually higher in those higher deciles than in the 2018-19 data. Now, just as with the level changes, sometimes looking at the SBA index helps us to understand it a little bit better. So when we convert this exact same data to SBA index scores, we see some pretty interesting things. Here's our top decile, the top 10% of students. Notice they are well into level 4. And in fact, 22 and 23 are even higher than 18 and 19. When we look at the 4th decile, you'll notice that students on average, the mean SBA index score is at standard by the 4th decile. So that means the 4th 10% of students, the 4th lowest 10% of students, we're already at standard. And that is a very hopeful thing. Because what it means is that beyond that point, on average, all of those students are well above meeting proficiency. And in fact, here's our 6th decile where those lines are now crossing and the 22-23 performance is accelerated over the 18-19 performance, and that is nearly at a level 4 by the 6th decile. So we talked a little bit about demographics, and this is the English Language Arts for grade 8. This data breaks it down by income status. So our lighter lines are not low-income students, so they do not qualify for free and reduced lunch. Our darker lines are the students that do qualify for free and reduced lunch. And so whether we're talking about pre or post-pandemic, you do see the gap between those two groups of students, and we talked about this before. There are some very interesting things about the performance pre and post-pandemic, though. So when we look at the green and the red, which are the 18 and 19 school years, and we compare them to the 22 and 23, which are the blue and the purple school years. One of the things that we see is that in the 18 and 19 school year, if you look at what decile students were on average meeting standard, you would see for non-low income students, it was at the 2nd decile. That's pretty low. I mean, it's in a good way. Low is good here. It's like golf. For the low-income students, it's in the 5th decile. There's a 3 decile difference, right? And though it is shifted just 1 decile over, which is a very modest change, the difference in 22 and 23 is the same, 3 deciles. The one difference that is maybe pronounced is that 1st decile. And this is obviously where we are always working to spend our time, whether it's in extended programs and that sort of thing. This is the lowest 10% of performing students, and low-income students in the lowest 10% of performers, they did have a much bigger gap than other students. And that points us in a direction of where we need to spend some time, right? The interesting thing is that by the 2nd decile, that gap is gone. They're performing at about the same rate as they were in 2022. And it is very similar to the 18-19 data. And in fact, by the time you hit about the 4th to the 5th decile, the 23 scores start to diverge and they're higher. So that purple line is higher than the blue line. And so that shows some acceleration in those deciles of students, in those 10% groups of students. So all of this helps us to better understand on a much finer grain our students' data and their learning. And I started this presentation by talking about our data rules and the ladder of influence. And that's because this is a lot of data. And ultimately, it's only useful if schools can analyze it as well and put it into practice and incorporate all of those other pieces of data that they triangulate. And so now I would like to turn it over to our regional superintendents to talk about that phase of analysis of data to action.
All right, we just want to begin by acknowledging incredible efforts by our students and families, staff. I just want you to think back about so many up arrows and some green shades and some plus signs that describe all of the progress. And we are just so proud of our students, our staff, and our families. And we also know we always have work to do, but we are proud to serve in Everett Public Schools and thankful as a parent. So much hard work behind these numbers, and we're going to walk you through how we move from some analysis to action. So I want to point your attention to the right here, and this is a continuous improvement process, and remind you that this was a frame that we used with the board when we engaged with some data in August around panorama data. So the first thing that we want to point out is at the bottom, which is the student data overview. The student data overview is the overall story of achievement, and that's what we heard in great detail tonight. The outcome of a student data overview, we identify specific trends, specific patterns, and priorities. We have been working with our schools since June when preliminary data results were coming in to do exactly that work. And to remind you, we were sharing with you in August that all school leadership teams were engaging in a student data overview with these and other data specific to their school sites, just as we did tonight with a district overview. So again, the outcome of a student data overview, specific trends, patterns, and priorities. Once we have those, we move into step 2. Before we rush to action, step 2 is we dig deeper. We need to test what our understanding of the data is, and we need to define our focus more narrowly. So how do we do that? We start using data that is more real time. Remember, the SBA data is from spring. So we have lots of data that is available to us, is specific at the student level, is blended, and it just helps us narrow the focus. It helps priorities emerge and as we go up towards action. So we have so many tools. We have iReady. Students take the fall diagnostic. That's a powerful tool for us to dig deeper. We have classroom-based assessments that are part of our Tier 1 curriculum that and assignments that we can use. We have 9th grade on-track indicators that we're regularly collecting and tracking. Even student work analysis and teacher teams. So that could be as simple as a classroom assignment. All of these things are specific to students, specific to standards, and are associated with the patterns and trends that we're digging into. We have tools that help us to do this efficiently. We have Performance Matters that puts all of these data together. We also have the Student Success Platform, which you learned about in August, that incorporates all of our social emotional learning as well. So we put all of these things together with the digger deeping focus, and we know we're ready to move to action when it's kind of like, okay, we're ready to go. I know what to do. And we also have a baseline description of where what the problem is, where we're starting from, because it's at that point very precise.
So what does the school team do once they have done that data overview and then they have dug deeper? The first thing they do is they celebrate. It's really important. There are so many things to celebrate. There are lots of up arrows. Our students outperform their peers across the state, double digits in most areas. So many of our students are now outperforming where their same grade level peers were pre-pandemic. There's a whole lot to celebrate here. And many of our students are making more than 1 year's growth in a year. As Dr. Matthews pointed out, when you're seeing those SBA index scores go up rather than staying steady. So there's a whole lot to celebrate. And it's really important that we celebrate and we recognize those things, because staff and students can then see where their efforts have been effective, and they can double down on those effective efforts. They can also analyze what worked, and we can spread that out. Hey, your kids really rocked this assessment that we just did in the classroom. My kids struggled with this. What did you do? So we really need to find those bright spots and celebrate as well. And there were a whole lot of bright spots tonight. And then the school teams dig into what adult practices need to be put in place to continue to improve, to close an identified gap, to address identified student learning needs. So those adult practices include both leadership practices and teaching practices. And this fall, they've included significant work to distribute leadership so that teacher leaders are leading their teams in those deep dives. So that 4th grade team is working together, led by teacher leaders. And they can function as leaders of those teams as they plan and design instruction and monitor student learning progress by analyzing those common assessments aligned to grade level standards. Schools are using that analysis to plan instruction during the school day and to provide extended day and other interventions for students who are not yet at standard, especially those who are in those lowest deciles that Dr. Matthews was showing. Leadership, instruction, assessment, analysis, and interventions are all adult practices that make a difference in student learning, both to achieve proficiency and to ensure the growth to close those gaps.
So in addition to our data and academic lenses, as we've described, going deeper on identifying adult practices, our work would be incomplete if we didn't also apply an equity lens to the school improvement work and planning that we put into each and every year. So most recently on October 13th, during our Learning Improvement Day, all of our schools and our district-wide staff were engaged in equity action planning. How do we actually meet the needs of all students to address the needs that we see in our data? And it's important to understand that in the continuous improvement model of school improvement, that data it tells you what the needs and gaps are of your students' learning. It doesn't tell you how to address them or how to fix that, right? So it's a really imperative that in our continuous improvement process that we engage all of our staff and our leaders in collaborating around the best approaches using culturally responsive practices, right, embedded in our work to actually get the gains. So you can see right here just a quick draft snapshot of a school improvement plan where you can see embedded within it the focus on equity around the actions that we're taking to meet the needs of all students. And finally, the culmination of this work, this planning for the year about how we're going to get those results and improve the data, all the great data that you saw, is culminated in school improvement plans that are actually near completion here by the end of this month.
That last step then is implementing those targeted professional learning and school improvement planning actions, putting it into place. And again, it's important after we notice and celebrate the great successes to identify those adult practices that have to be put into place to improve student achievement. Then they implement targeted professional learning and school improvement actions. So here I have 2 examples. On the left is a high school that has identified a need through a deeper dive in their data. They have students, they noticed, that they have students who have been receiving multilingual learner services for more than 5 or 6 years throughout our district and have not made progress toward the English language proficiency as measured on the WIDA for our English language learners. Students, not only those of English language development for our multilingual learners, but all teachers in the school need to understand English language development and how to scaffold their instruction so that all learners will have access to the grade level standards and progress toward the English language proficiency. So in August, more than 30 teachers from Everett High School gathered to learn about the WIDA standards and to learn specific strategies to support the students. The action in their school improvement plan is based on a specific need identified by a deep dive in their student achievement data and is aligned with the strategic priority of reducing gaps in student achievement. Then during the lid day, then some of these 30 teachers that learned it during August, then were teaching it to their peers. They did it during the lid day, and then they did it on a Learning Improvement Friday later in the month in September. So so it's a continuous learning process led by teacher leaders. And then as we move forward into the year, as they do their instructional review, for example, leaders will look for evidence of implementation of these strategies. Similarly, on the right is an example of a middle school that identified the need to increase student-to-student discourse in mathematics, similar, in fact, to what you saw, Director Herman, in the IR that you saw. Students talking about math and leading each other through that learning. So that increases students' ability to meet the standards and increase achievement and close gaps in math. This action is identified in their school improvement plan. And during the first staff meeting of the year, teachers at this school who are members of the instructional leadership team led their colleagues in professional learning about strategies to increase student discourse and support all learners in math, and especially those who are struggling the most.
All right, this last slide, the main emphasis that I want to bring your attention to is the bottom. So you see that the implementation is also connected again to digging deeper with student data. So we're allocating time, for example, with our professional learning, our Learning Improvement Fridays, but the ongoing progress is to test. So we've identified these targeted actions for progress monitoring. Are they having the initial impacts on student learning that we expected? How would we know? We would return back to the same digging deeper data that we identified in the first place. That could be an updated iReady assessment. That could be more student work, a unit assessment, any number of things depending on what the focus area was. And who is engaging? Teacher teams and school teams, leadership teams. So you see here a school improvement example where this step has been identified as an embedded part of their school improvement plan with the focus area for reading and to provide culturally responsive professional development and the time to examine the results of their reading units and their implementation. So it's really connected. We don't just implement, we have to test, we have to progress monitor, and so we start to go back and forth between those two steps.
Right. Whew. What a ride. So as we've shared tonight, data is the foundation upon which we plan for continuous improvement. And while there's much to celebrate in our data and academic growth we achieved last year, we know our work is not done. As you saw in the SBA Index data that was presented this evening, SBA Index data that was presented shows growth. And growth is the number one thing, that every student is getting better, right? And that's our commitment to our students each and every day. You may be familiar with the famous phrase from an Aerosmith song, life's a journey, not a destination. And continuous improvement is very much the same. We never get to the end. We never get to stop. But it's the journey that we take together as a staff that makes the ride, if you will, all that much more pleasurable because we're working together as a we. Not as individuals. And just that the fact that in Everett Public Schools, it is the work of our schools and our district, led by our superintendent, Dr. Saltzman, but also the commitment of the executive cabinet and the hard work of our teachers, our para educators, and our staff in our schools that get the results that you saw this evening. So as we move forward this school year, I'm excited, and I know my colleagues are excited, because we know that the work that we're doing is yielding results, but also that the plans that we've put into place based on this data, this deep dive, is stimulating even more and more growth for our kids. Thank you.
This is the opportunity for directors and student representatives to have an opportunity to speak and ask questions. Are there any questions? Director Herman, you've
I'll
got
start.
your hands on the mic.
Wow. Yeah, the team that was fantastic. So just what a presentation and a lot of data and data heavy. But kudos just again on what it took to make those increases. I feel as though, and this is a general statement of these last few years, just sort of that coming back, and just now it feels like evidence of just solidly being on track and seeing that rise. Because I have to admit, I was kind of surprised at seeing some districts that were sort of flip-flopping, but we're headed in the right direction. So first of all, a big kudos across the board on that. As they say, glows and grows, right? This is so that the glows were very obvious to me. A couple of questions, if you could go back on slide, just that I wrote down, on slide 15, I was curious on there, the interpretation of going from those students that were going from, for example, a level 4 to a level 1 or 2. What I'm just trying to envision what stories are happening on those scores.
You know, that's just so hard to say. And that kind of a jump is probably really a conversation that the school's having with the individual student about what's going on, just even beyond what's happening in school, because that's pretty stark change.
And that's what I'm imagining when we have our interventions and our systems in the schools. Those are the kids where we really want to make sure what's going on there.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
That's a whole thing in itself. Can you remind me again, separate question then, for the WACAS, the science, 11th grade, first place. What was the reason behind Everett really excelling in science? What did we do as a district that put ourselves as number one in that? You know what I'm saying? Do you want to address that, Dr. Foden?
Yep, thank you. I don't think it's necessarily speculation, but I think one of the things that we did is Everett Public Schools was on board with the next generation science standards early on. And when we did adoptions for science content and curricula, it was very focused on ensuring that we had NGSS aligned curriculum and instructional practices that supported those pieces. So I do think that's why regionally, I think within those 25 largest districts, Everett really stands out, is because we have teachers who are focused on teaching those standards, not just at high school, but systemically from kindergarten and pre-K all the way through our system.
Okay, I was just thinking lessons learned there. What can we take and apply across the board?
I think when we do standards aligned curriculum adoption and we teach with fidelity, and we have really, really talented teaching staff who are implementing really best practice, that's why we get results like that.
Okay, great. And then the last one, I know we and this isn't being presented tonight, but we're looking at overall, and as a district, we look at these overall numbers. You wouldn't necessarily have this right now, but consistency between schools. That's also of interest, to just make sure that, you know, when we see this growth, that is pretty consistent on schools. And I think that's what gets back in those IRs when the schools dig into the data. But any comments on that?
You have an extended slide deck of probably 200 slides. There's school data in there. But yes, of course, I mean, we look at school data and their trends over time. Yeah, it's just so much data to put into one presentation.
Yeah. No, and that's just it. Just making sure as well that as we see some schools excelling for the same reason, is what are they doing that we can take to the other schools,
right?
And copy. Thank you.
Director Mason.
Yeah, so many celebrations, it's been said, but it really is remarkable. The numbers are great. My question is maybe in those 200 slides that I'll be honest, I didn't look through every one before the meeting. But I'm more curious, a lot of your examples were of elementary grades, and more interested in the pre-pandemic, post-pandemic at the high school level and what we've seen there.
So I'd have to look at the slides to speak, because as you know, I don't guess. But the data is in there for all grade levels and subject areas. So we looked at the mean scores for all of them. I initially had many more of those in, but it really is just getting too much to really look at. And I think the ones that you saw, the 3rd and the 8th grade, are kind of indicative of the pattern that we see.
Okay, I'll go back and look through. Thank you.
Happy to go over them with you if you'd like.
Director Revelinsky.
Color me impressed. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Student rep, do you have any questions?
Director Herman covered my questions on the science scores, but other than that, it's nice to see the data looking well and that we're outperforming other districts.
Thank you.
Student rep Gilbertson, do you have any questions? I do want to say thank you very much for giving us the cohort information, because I really enjoyed actually seeing how students progress from 3rd to 4th to 5th grade, and to find, that their growth was continually going upward. That I appreciated very, very much. And I think I would have to ditto what Director Herman asked as far as the next phase. How does it compare from the different schools? And how can we look to the data to find out what additional resources, because here we are the board that then identifies how we should spend our money at the different schools to impact the growth that we would hope to see from certain cohorts of kids going through. We look at kids leaving elementary, going into middle school. Are we preparing them for that? Are they still, kids will still face challenges, but are they facing more challenge than necessary because we maybe did not prepare them as much as we should have in the middle school? And then also, we still want kids to go to high school. What can we do to ensure that their preparation is up there and they are ready? And it's so great to have the data to then be able to say, how do we put the resources that are necessary to ensure their success? So I appreciate the data. I'm glad double digits. We're doing outstandingly within the region. Kudos to all of the teachers and that ensured that our kids were doing well. And we have a ways to go still, because even though we can see 65 and 85% are meeting standard, what about those kids who are not? What are we doing to ensure that those kids now can see a big turnaround? And here again, I'd like to find out if summer school will help ensure them the opportunities to be a part of the group that are doing extremely well and have met standard. what can we do to turn them around and offer them the opportunities? So thank you. Oh,
Can I
Director
just
Herman,
chime
yes.
in on what you're saying? I still do think, and I know there's a cost associated with this, and we've discussed it a little bit, but those 2.5 months over the summer, what could we be doing with that, whether or not it's a traditional looking summer school, or whether there are other opportunities to utilize that time, especially for that lowest performing and early grades, earlier intervention. How can we, and what does that mix look like that we can offer as a district? And again, I want to take away, I think we have a vision of what we have offered at summer school in the past. Are there other ways that we could continue the learning of those students over the summer? Maybe utilizing less resources, maybe partnering, but really getting it into high gear, because I feel like we are really on the right track, and now I think we're ready to continue to step it up. I'm so excited about this, though.
Well, thank you, Dr. Matthews.
Very welcome.
Thank you very much for the data-driven exercise. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, we shall now move to section 15.0, which is information, preliminary fourth quarter financial update and financial outlook. Our presenter is at the podium, Ms. Tress.
I'm getting proficient at the right clicks. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Saltzman, Board of Directors. Today, I will go over a brief presentation providing a preliminary update on the fourth quarter actuals for the 22-23 operating budget. I will walk through a summary of the preliminary results for the general fund and its revenues, expenditures, and fund balance, as well as an updated fiscal outlook and a review of the 4 remaining comprehensive funds. The preliminary expenditures exceed, and what I want to remind everyone tonight is that this is preliminary information. We don't file our financial information with the state until February 14th. And so we will have updated information in our November meeting as well. So the preliminary expenditures exceeds revenues and transfers by $1.9 million. And the good news is this results in an anticipated fund balance of 8.9% and an unassigned fund balance of 6.6%, above our board policy of 5% and 2.5%. As you can see, the fund balance is higher than the budgeted fund, the preliminary actual fund balance is anticipated to be higher than our ending fund balance, and I will discuss the details throughout the remainder of the slides. First thing we want to talk about is enrollment. This is a picture of our monthly annual average student FTE, which is the primary driver of how we calculate our funding. Typically, we talk about our October 1 head count, but to kind of anticipate and project out our revenues, but the annual average FTE is what we calculate our actual funding on. And what I really want to highlight here is that you see the decline in our enrollment in the 2021 fiscal year after the pandemic. But the exciting news is, if you look at the average line over on the far right, we do see a slight increase year over year of annual average FTE. Another thing to note, which is kind of positive as well, is that although last year's October 1 headcount slightly declined from the prior year, from the 21 fiscal year, we are seeing, again, that slight increase in our annual average FTE in the funding model. I'm cautiously optimistic about our enrollment trends, and as Mike Gunn mentioned in the October 11th board meeting, he will be providing an enrollment update with our updated projections in the January-February timeframe. Looking at our revenue trends, we see consistency year over year, and federal funding has assisted with this. As usual, our October and our April show large increases due to the timing of when we receive our local levy. We do anticipate an increase in revenues for the 23-24 fiscal year. However, we will see a decline in our federal revenues. Looking at our monthly expenditure trends, we within our total board appropriations for the fiscal year of the 22-23. The reduced educational program and hold on non-essential spending really impacted our trends. If you look at the top gray line for the 22-23 fiscal year, you can see in July and August a downward decline in expenditures. Typically, we see an increase in July and a slight decline in August, and so that there was a real change into our spending patterns over that fiscal year, which really drove the change in our anticipated fund balance. Expenditures were lower than our projections really due to these trend changes, lower anticipated material and supply costs, and lower staffing costs related to our reduction plan. Looking at the past 10 years of our fund balance, you can see fluctuation year over year. We see that increase from 2018 to the infusion funding due to a change in our funding model after the McCleary decision was made, and then also in our federal funding increases. As you can also see in the 22 fiscal year and the 23 fiscal year, we are seeing a decline in fund balance. We do still anticipate a decline in fund balance for the 24 fiscal year. We are still in a structural deficit, meaning our expenditures are still exceeding our revenues due to state funding shortfalls and an increase in inflation and staffing costs. One thing I want to highlight as we look at what our fund balance is anticipated for this fiscal year is that when we start the next fiscal year, it always starts a little bit lower because we anticipate an increase in expenditures. So we anticipate a preliminary beginning fund balance for this year of 8.7%. Looking at what our fund balance looked like from the budget to actual perspective, our fund balance is higher than our budgeted fund balance due to increased investment income as interest rates have been rising throughout the fiscal year, lower cost in our materials and supplies and capital outlay expenditures, lower staffing costs due to vacancies, aligning our staff with our class size goals and the reduced educational program, and a lower deficit in our special services program. We budgeted about $11.3 million of unfunded portion for special education, and we're going to end around $9 million. Looking ahead to the next 4 years, as you can see here, we are still spending down fund balance. And what I want to highlight on this slide is that we've updated the projections to include updated enrollment. And so in our budgeted enrollment, we utilized a flat enrollment year over year. For this, we've updated it to utilize the medium projections the medium projections we received last January. So it does increase in enrollment through the 26-27 fiscal year. However, we still are deficit spending, so our expenditures are still exceeding the revenues each year, and I do anticipate in reductions in future years. Looking at our capital fund, this supports our building construction and modernization, safety, and improvements for technology. Some of the major projects we spent our funding on are one-to-one student devices and life cycle management for our technology levies, the Clean Building Act design work, building upgrades, portable moves, and roofing projects. Typically, our expenditures in the capital fund align with the timing of the projects. Our debt service fund supports our long-term bonds, debt payments for our principal and interest. This fund balance supports a multi-year payment schedule, and this also aligns with our payment schedule as well. You'll see the ending fund balance decline year over year as bonds are paid off. And what I'm excited to talk about with the ASB fund is that we are spending about or a little bit higher than what we did pre-pandemic. So we're seeing that activity increase overall. What we'll look forward to next year is making sure that we work with those students to spend down that fund balance. Our transportation vehicle fund helps support the purchase of our school buses that the districts own, as well as any bus-related infrastructure. We had 3 electric buses we received this year. Part of that funding was through a grant, as well as through our state funding within the buses. The majority of our transportation funding goes through our general fund as we contract out our services as well. Thank you. Questions?
Directors, do you have any questions for Ms. Tress? Yes, Director Mason has a question for you.
Of course, I have questions.
I expect.
Thank you, and I'm just so pleased to see that some of the unknowns have come in more favorably than we anticipated, and that things are looking a little bit rosier than originally planned. So correct me if I'm wrong, is our ending fund balance a little over 9.8 million higher than we expected, what we budgeted?
Yeah, correct.
Okay,
And that's,
so-
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna make the comment, that's close to a third of the reductions we made last year, which, it's such a challenge understanding what needs to be cut and how aggressive to be about it versus holding out a little bit and seeing how some of these things lay out. And the timing, of course, is always not the way that we want it to be. Okay.
And I will say that our reductions were about 0.75% of our change in anticipated fund balance. And so it was a pretty impact in July and August. And so because of the staffing changes that happened in the July timeframe. What I do also want to say is that I believe our deficit for the 23, as of today, the 23-24 fiscal year is still about it's gone down from the 4.2, but to be about 3.4 million. And so we still are in a pretty large deficit spending. And if we don't, so I just wanted to say that.
Right. We had a pretty high fund balance several years ago leading into this, knowing that we were headed down this path.
Yeah.
And it's nice to see that we can still maintain that 5%. But there is maybe a little room to shrink some of that. So on slide 8, can you explain what the state funding shortfalls are? Are those ones that are new or ones that we've sort of known about?
Those are the ones that we typically know about, that one of them would be the special ed funding that we're unfunded around that piece of it. The other piece is the fact that our staff cost increases don't increase at the same rate as our state funding does, and our levy doesn't increase at the rate to fund those additions. And so that's one of the other issues we have in our funding.
Right. And what is the 2.5% goal on that?
That's
slide?
our unassigned fund balance. So we have a restricted fund balance for pots of money that we have to use on like our federal funding. We can only use it a certain way, and so we can carry that over in that way. Or our CTE funding, we can only use it in a certain way. So we have specific rules that we have to use that. All the other funds, we have more flexibility on what we can spend those dollars on.
Right. I understand the difference between the restricted and unrestricted, but what is the 2.5% goal?
That's the unassigned portion of it. So the unrestricted portion is the goal.
Whose goal is that?
That is in our board policy.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That was my question. Thank you. So that's in the same policy as the 5%.
Yeah.
Okay.
5%.
Thank you. And then just question and maybe help from Mr. Gunn. Expenditures were significantly off in the capital projects fund. Were there larger projects that were postponed, or are we kind of saving up for the big remodel now that we're don't have a bond to cash in on a school project?
Do you want me to go over your list, or do you want to go over your list?
I would characterize it as some planned expenditures that we didn't end up having to make this year. One example is that we have some property acquisition we're holding money for in the southeast quadrant of our district, and hoping that the property will be up for sale by the owner, and it hasn't yet.
So timing issue on some of those items.
Excuse me, timing issue. The other one is we had reserved about $5 million for anticipated improvements at the Memorial Baseball Stadium that did not happen. We're continuing to budget for some expenditures at that site in case the county and the city come to some agreement on that with us. And then there were a couple of other things.
Smaller projects, yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
smaller
thank you
projects.
very
Yes,
much.
Sure.
Just curious, those.
Director Herman, you have a question?
Quick question, is there an update on the Four Corners property as far as, is that leasing still on schedule to open?
We do anticipate students to start to come in the late fall, early winter timeframe.
No changes, okay, thank you.
I'm just gonna follow up, would it be possible to, do we have like detailed conversation, or do we know if it's only a month or so away, or?
We, our staff, my staff, communicates with the leasing management firm about every 2 weeks, and they're frankly getting somewhat tired of talking to us. We keep close tabs on that development, and we send updates to both schools, well, to 3 schools involved, the elementary, middle, and high school, as well as a number of central office staff, and we will be sure to send you a copy of the next update.
Right, thank you so much.
You bet, thanks.
Any further questions, student rep, director, let's see, no? Thank you very much, Andy's great presentation. Thank you, I appreciate it all the time. We shall go to section 16.0, which is our unfinished business section. There's no unfinished business scheduled for this meeting agenda. We shall now move to new business, which is section 17.0. The first item on that is schedule 1200S, which is the board's annual regular meeting schedule. Dr. Saltzman, did you have a presentation you would like to present on that one, or did you want me to go forward with that?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Because of a change in, I guess you would say, in February's meeting, there is currently 2 meetings scheduled for that. The second meeting, we're proposing that it be canceled and moved to a work schedule or work session on the following Thursday because of attendance issues. And so we're listing this as a proposed cancellation and coming out with a new schedule on the 23-24 school board meeting schedule.
So just to clarify, this meeting is getting moved, but the new meeting is not on here.
No.
And why is that?
So what we'll do is cancel this schedule and
We can't do them both at the same
a
time?
proposed new schedule. As a special meeting. Oh, okay. We'll publish it as a special meeting. But cancel it as a regular meeting.
Okay. And so why do we list the other 3, but we're not listing the new one? Okay. Thank you.
Was not a date scheduled for like that Thursday? Okay, we're looking at that. Okay. As a special meeting. Okay, there was a conflict with attendance in that particular meeting, so that we can have everybody in attendance at that. The proposal was to eliminate that and cancel that meeting and then reschedule a work study session on a Thursday, vice a Tuesday. And we're still looking into that Thursday meeting. So what we would like to do is, because it's in February, is to get it on the proposal to cancel that day 2 weeks in advance. You get first reading and second reading so that it's canceled for the public, for open meeting day. Any questions?
Nope.
Okay, fantastic. We'll move along. We'll come up to now another policy 4130, section 17.02. Mr. Fleckenstein.
Good evening. Revisions to Policy 4130 Public Information Program are presented for your consideration this evening to comply with House Bill 1230. You may recall at the last regular board meeting, this particular House bill precipitated proposed changes that are now on the consent agenda to Policy 2334 Substance Abuse Prevention Program. This legislation requires school and district websites to post a prominent link to information from the Department of Health about substance use trends, overdose symptoms and response, and the secure storage of prescription drugs, over-the-counter medications, and firearms and ammunition. The legislation also requires school districts to make the Department of Health information accessible through the district's social media channels. The required information postings must occur at least quarterly. In addition, minor other revisions update this policy to align with the current language in the WASDA model policy. Proposed revisions to Policy 4130 Public Information Program have been reviewed by legal counsel and superintendent's cabinet prior to tonight's meeting. I do want to point out, one, this particular copy does not include a full strike through of the final section down below. This whole section should be struck through. As you can see, it's been incorporated into the final sentence of the end of that paragraph. So I do want to point that out, and that it will be completely struck through when it is presented for second reading.
For second reading, okay, fantastic, I understand. Directors, we can approve this by general consent to go to second reading if there are no further questions. Yes?
Yeah, I said yes.
Yeah, just, I'm looking at general consent, just nod your head, thank you. Okay, we shall move this on to second reading.
Thank you.
Okay, we shall now move to our last page. Right. Section 18.0, which is upcoming agenda items. Dr. Saltzman, will you?
Thank you, Madam Chair,
Thank
Board
you.
of Directors, and just for a point of privilege before I go over this,
Yes, sir.
I just want to, again, call out everybody in the entire district that helps with student achievement. That the scores tonight that you saw were outstanding, always need for improvement, but outstanding. That takes the entire district. Kudos to the data department led by Dr. Matthews, because she helped shape it for you tonight, but helps shape it for everybody as they gather the work. So kudos to Dr. Matthews in the audience, but we don't take that lightly with student achievement. It is the crown jewel of public education when you get to share great data. And I also want to point a privilege to the public, to the financial office today of Andy Tress for these monthly reports. It's very important that our public understands the budget monthly, and we've made that commitment to our public. So thank you for these monthly reports. They're very beneficial. So thank you to the board for that point of privilege. At the November 9th special meeting, the board will conduct an executive session to review the performance of a public employee. On November 14th, 2023, the regular meeting, the board agenda will contain the following: a technology plan update, several policies for review, recognition for our National Merit Scholar finalists, recognition for the November Core Value Champions for Learning, Jackson Elementary School Site Design Review and Education Specifications Approval, legislation priorities first reading, Career Connected Learning Spotlight, instructional and library surplus, technology and electronics surplus, OSPI Equity Dual Credit Grant, 9th Grade Success Grant, Millennial Ministries Sole Source and Contact, Homeless Student Stability Education Program Grant, and the Puget Sound Taxpayer Accountability Account Interlocal Agreement. And I would like to please add the November 16th special meeting with the WASDA Conference in Bellevue, Washington. Thank you, Madam Chair and Board of Directors.
Thank you, Dr. Saltzman. Appreciate that. Thank you. We now come to section 19.0, which is executive closed session. We will have a closed session following this board meeting. And so therefore, before we go recess for 5 minutes into the closed session, we will go to section 20, which is adjournment. This concludes the business then scheduled to come before the Board of Directors during this meeting. This board meeting is adjourned.